Welcome to Commander Central, episode 103, and we're here tonight doing a deck tech for Patreon supporter Austin, in particular his Gyrus Waker of Corpses Reanimator list. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
What, Max is back?
I know.
You let him back? Did he watch Twister for a 24-hour marathon or something?
No, he didn't. He came over to my house on his knees, begging and pleading, with tears running down his eye or his cheeks. And
all right, I guess. Well, welcome back, Max.
Well, thank you. I know there's a tornado, and I know people die and people live. See, I'm done. That's how the movie goes.
You've seen all you need to see.
I think only one person dies in the entire movie.
My statement is still not correct. It's still correct.
The group of people in that truck died too. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And I think in the very beginning, doesn't Helen Hunt's family die, like in that flashback sequence?
Her old man does.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, because he was really smart and decided to try to hold the storm cellar door down.
Right, himself. That's how tornadoes work.
YOLO.
I mean, that's no dumber than the end where they strap themselves in with a belt.
Yeah, inside. Weren't they inside of that,
they were
butcher shop or something?
I thought it was a barn, but I can't. Either way, it's insane. So we just spoiled Twister for anyone who hasn't seen it.
That 20-year-old movie.
It's a bummer. Sorry, everybody. So how was your weekend aside from begging for forgiveness?
Pretty good. Really nice here in Eau Claire. So
it was a very spring-like weekend. It was nice to get outside. Chris went fishing.
I did, and it was hot out.
Yeah,
and we didn't catch anything, which made me even more mad.
I did some yard work and watched the Eau Claire Marathon, and that was about it for me. So it was uneventful. No one played any games, I don't think. Did you go up to the tournament at all on Saturday, Chris?
I did, but there wasn't enough people for it to fire, and I was running on about 30 hours of no sleep, so I just left.
Okay. Yeah, I thought about going up to try to get a chance at the Bulls of Citadel promo, and I was like, it was too nice to be inside playing Magic, I felt. So
yeah, I'm sure it'll get given out one of these days here.
Yeah. That's a good-looking card. I do think Max has some contest winners to announce here, though.
we definitely do. So we have our contest winners for the War of the Spark bundles we're giving away. So our Facebook winner is Jeff Say. Our Twitter winner is AJ Molidor at Alfred Molidor. And our Patreon winner is Dean Von Allman. So we'll be reaching out to all of you guys, our people, later this week with try to get your address so we can ship those out.
Yeah, for sure. 3 winners, 3 bundles.
Yeah.
Ton of Planeswalkers.
It's a lot of Planeswalkers.
Very cool. And by the time this airs, this will be the night before we show up at GP Madison.
Correct.
Magic Fest Madison, whatever you want to call it.
GP Madison.
All right, GP to keep Chris happy.
I was going to say, we're going to what in Madison?
Wizards.
So this is my first event of the year. I think this is the first one for all of us, right? Or has someone gone to something? I don't think I've gone to a SCG or anything this year.
Chris has had a couple 1Ks at smaller shops, but nothing from a big company.
Yeah, I don't think I've gone to anything big yet this year.
So GP/Magic Fest season is starting up, and Madison is the first of like half a dozen different things we're going to in the next 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that, too. This is going to be a fun summer.
I hope it's a good time this weekend or this next weekend. So
we'll make sure we keep people apprised on social media of where we're sitting and playing games. If you happen to be at Madison looking to play some Commander, at least one of us should be around at most points in time, Friday and Saturday for sure, I would say.
Yep.
If you see me with an angry look on my face, don't come near me. It cost me $85 to register for the main event. And if I get just a crap pool, I'm going to be furious.
Well, you know what? Talking about people being angry over paying for things. So we had the whole Mythic edition of War of the Spark fiasco that went down this week. Now, I don't think Chris was involved in any of that because you didn't attempt to buy one, did you?
No, why would I buy that stuff?
Max, however, and I and a bunch of people in our Slack all were involved. And that didn't work out so good for almost anybody.
Nope, it's like Thanos snapped us all away.
So there was a wave of them that went up for sale, for those that don't know, for probably a 5-minute window. Anybody who bought them in like the first minute or 2, roughly, I think, had their orders canceled because there was a screw up with sales tax, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if you bought it quickly, your order got canceled because you weren't charged correctly. Then if you managed to get one in like that next couple minute window, you were fine. Probably. Then they were all sold out. And then like 10 minutes later, they came up for sale again. So a bunch of people jumped in and like tried to buy them again. And I believe all of those vaporized as far as I can tell as well.
Yep.
So 2 of the 3 kind of purchasing windows, people didn't get their Mythic edition of War of the Spark that has those 8 alt art Planeswalkers. Now, supposedly, if you got your order refunded, you're going to get like an eBay gift coupon and presumably something else from WotC as well, like the equivalent of the box topper everybody got last time around.
Yep.
That's wishful thinking, at least.
Well, that hasn't been confirmed. That part hasn't. They said they're going to make it up, but like we don't know with what or how. So what do you think of that whole scenario, Max?
We're a family-friendly show, so it was not great.
I mean, they've screwed this up at least 2 of the 3 times they've tried it.
Yeah, they're not batting 1,000. Let's put it like that.
And I'll say in this case, it was farmed out to eBay. So, I mean, maybe it's eBay's problem. We don't know if WotC prepared them completely for what was going to be going down. It's just, we don't have that information. But somebody somewhere screwed up. They screwed up the first time, too. I mean, maybe this just isn't a good idea in general to have things that are only available if you happen to be online for a 5-minute window on a Wednesday afternoon or something.
Mm-hmm.
I just like get them out to the shop and see what happens there. I don't know. I didn't love the idea from the get-go that they were only going to be available online briefly, and the fact that they've screwed it up 2 out of 3 times at least makes me not like it at all.
Yeah, it makes me not like it because after the Guilds of Ravnica one, they're like, we're going to do this better. We're going to move it to eBay because then we can ship internationally versus just the USA. And then Ravnica Allegiance one, nobody wanted because those walkers, I guess, the art didn't do it for a lot to. And
there weren't really any chase ones in that.
No,
in that collection either. Whereas now this one at least has Ugin and Jace the Mind Sculptor in it. So that right there, people want for specific decks.
Mm-hmm. But just to know that after the Guilds one, they said we're going to do this again, we're going to do it better, and it's like they never said it to me, and that's what kind of hurts the most, especially because the only thing I've really seen from WotC was a Facebook post saying, right. Just read the eBay emails, essentially. We'll figure it out.
Well, it's also one of those things, like, if it just didn't work, that's one thing. But thinking you got your purchase in and then having to get it refunded really sucks in a different kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly when the money takes a week to come back to you. Like, they had no problem taking it out of your account 3 seconds after you click the button, but it's going to take a week to get refunded. That's a big deal for a lot of people, too.
For sure.
All right, so I think that's enough on that. We don't love the whole system in the first place, and, if you happen to get lucky for you, great. I wish you the best if you happen to get one. But I would say more people didn't, as far as I can tell, than that did.
Yes, I will agree with that as well.
Okay, we have an existing contest. You mentioned the ones that just wrapped up, but I think we have some that are ongoing where we're giving away the deck that we live brewed in Show 100.
We are. So that is our Patreon giveaway for this month. So as long as you are a subscriber or become a supporter on Patreon by the end of the month, you'll get entered to win that deck in that awesome custom wooden deck box that Patreon listener David S. is sending us.
Yes, Aaron Kane custom wooden deck box. So you're getting the sweet deck box and a deck. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So that will be given away at the end of this month to supporters. So if you want to support us and be a member of that club and hang out with us in our Slack, you can do that by going to patreon.com.
Is that or is that our pitch? Because I'm good with that.
I was waiting for you to jump in there and say something smarter than me.
Look on Max's face. He looked like he was so lost.
I'm tempted to tell Ken to just leave that in because it's actually kind of funny.
I think we should.
So Max, the person who handles this much better than me, how would you support us on Patreon?
Yeah, just head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central. Check out all of our reward tiers. Everyone gives you something a little different, including one of these Decks You Play episodes.
Well, speaking of Decks You Play, what are we talking about here tonight?
Gyrus, Waker of Corpses from Commander 18.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that. I know things.
You are on the ball. This is brought to us by listener Austin. He didn't give us a ton of guidance here. He said he wants to tune it up, make it more consistent. He doesn't have a real specific budget. But a little background on Austin as a player, he's relatively new to Magic, right, Max?
A couple years, yeah, I would say that.
And he doesn't play that much. Like, he comes and plays in because this is actually a local player.
Yes.
Who comes and plays in our shop. And he's been playing more lately, but like I would guess probably until recently he played once or twice a month, I think.
I would think that's accurate.
Yeah. So he's been playing not that long and not that much during that interim. So he's a newer player. It's a newer deck. It's a modded precon, but there's probably a lot of things we can do to tweak this deck. I like Gyrus a lot as a commander, so I'm kind of looking forward to doing this one.
Yeah, that works for me. And like Dana said, there's not a lot of notes because the notes were given to me verbally while we were at the bar watching hockey one night.
Well, that's the best way to do it. If every Patreon supporter doing a deck tech would do it verbally at the bar, we'd probably find a way to make that work. Sounds like we're on CCO at this point. If we're doing everything verbally watching hockey while you drink, we could be on CCO podcast. So first things first, we will look at his land base, if that works for you guys.
Sure.
42 lands. What do you think of that?
Too many.
Yeah, same here.
Particularly in a Jund deck, since you have access to green. I wouldn't want to cut it too low because his average CMC in this deck is pretty high. I think we'll talk about maybe lowering that a little bit too, but he's running just under 4, so like 3.91. And there's some stuff that's cheating things into play just because of Gyrus' ability, but it's not really what the deck is doing, so I think he'd want to clean that up a little bit. I don't know if I would cut it, like, I'm not going to go to 36 for this deck, but I think 38's probably sufficient. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Chris looks like he's thinking.
I was thinking. I was trying to do the math on it. And I mean, yeah, 42 seems like a lot. But the more and more I keep looking at Gyrus, it seems like maybe the 40 range would be fine due to the simple fact, as we'll talk about it later, there's not really any mana rocks in here.
There's not a ton of rocks. There's not a ton of other ramp either. And that's something we will maybe jump on a little bit in the next segment. We'll talk about ramp. But yeah, you definitely could cut it down. I don't think... I would probably go to 38, maybe 39. I think 40 is maybe still a little too much. But 42 is for sure too much. Mm-hmm. And I also think the land base itself, there's a lot of come into play tapped lands here. 16 lands that come into play tapped. That's a 30-year land base that just doesn't work the turn you play it. I think fixing that alone is going to smooth this deck out a lot. Looking at the utility lands he's running, I think Guild Mage's Forum, Forge of Heroes, Colony Garden, Bojuka Bog are all fine utility lands. Bojuka Bog and Garden come into play tapped, but I think they synergize well enough to be worth running, even if a couple of them do come into play tapped. Command Tower, obviously, is something you'd auto-run. It's great in any deck. In a 3-color deck, it's fantastic. 19 basics, I think, is nice and safe. I'm not going to tell them to run less than that. I think you're going to be in good shape if a Blood Moon comes down too, so I'm happy with that. So he has 1 shock land, which is good to have in this deck. I would probably get the other 2. They're relatively cheap right now because of standard. I think Exotic Orchard is the kind of thing you would probably run in almost any 3-color deck. It's almost always a dual land, and it's pretty frequently going to be a tri-land, and it doesn't come into play tapped. And the price has gone up a little bit, but I think City of Brass and Mana Confluence... In a 3-color deck, you just run them because they just solve your problems. They make all 3 colors. You lose a little bit of life, but I think it's worth it.
I don't think either of those cards are much more expensive than a shock land, though.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, they've gone up from like $4 to $6 or $7, and that's not nothing for a lot of people, but it's also the kind of thing where, like, once or twice a week, instead of buying the 2 packs you buy at the shop or something, just buy yourself a land. And odds are that's going to be more useful to you long term than playing the pack lottery anyway.
True.
Yep.
I would then clean up some of those bounce lands and probably the cycling lands because they just don't do much in this deck. I think they make sense in the Windgrace version of this deck, but I just don't know if you want them out. I would probably switch to the Battle Bond lands, maybe the Pain lands or the Filter, stuff that comes into play untapped and is going to get you your mana that turn. Mm-hmm. Are there any ones that you guys prefer over the others among that collection?
Between the Filters and the Pain lands or anything like that?
Or the check lands or the Battle Bond ones, yeah. Do you have any preference there?
I like the Filters a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, they were really expensive for a long time until that last reprint. Like, with the exception of the one Graven Karns, which had been reprinted in Time Spiral, it was at first in Time Spiral, and I think it got another reprint in something else. The rest of them were all like $25, $30. But since they showed up was one of the Modern Masters, right?
Masters 25.
I mean, they're most of them are like sub $6-ish for at least the ones that were in that reprint cycle.
Yeah, I think the green-black one, I bought a Masters 25 one for Tassiger, and it was over 10.
Okay, so they're creeping back up, and you know what? If we don't see them again in something, they're probably going to wind up back over 15 again in a year or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the Battle for Zendikar Battlelands, I think there's two in these color combinations. The red-green one
And the red-black.
and the red-black one are great because they are fetchable if you ever do up this mana base to put fetchers in.
Yep.
And the one cycling desert from Amonkhet, the dual land. The red-green one.
The red-green one. Sheltered Thicket, I do believe it's
Yeah,
called.
because you can fetch it as well. Yeah,
And
that's
Canyon
useful.
Slow. So there are two.
Yep.
So I'd say any combination of those, I would look at upgrading some of those bounce lands and the one color cyclers for sure.
Yep.
And like I said, I think that's going to make a huge difference in this deck, just not having lands come into play tapped and having ones that maybe make the colors you need more consistently. That alone makes a huge difference in a deck.
Agreed.
So we mentioned there wasn't much ramp, and there really isn't. There's only 2 artifacts in the whole deck. There's a Soul Ring and a Chromatic Lantern. And there's a few pieces of land ramp. There's a Cultivate, there's a Skyshroud Claim, Explosive Vegetation, Far Wanderings, and I guess technically Explore.
Yeah.
So that's only 7 total ramp sources, including 2 artifacts. Is that enough, do you think?
No.
I mean, I run decks that only have 7 ramp sources, but I think you're in green, and I think this is kind of a greedy deck. So I would agree it's not enough.
Yep. I would cut that Soul Ring.
Yeah, you would cut the Soul Ring, really?
This is my argument for that. Seeing how he's only playing 2 mana rocks, Soul Ring is actually, in my opinion, not that good unless you're running a lot more mana rocks with it. I would rather have, if you don't get it on turn 1 or anything like that, then it's really kind of a dead draw later. I'd rather have your green ramp spells that put lands into play since you're playing so many lands already.
And it is going to fix... I will not argue against running Soul Ring in this deck. I think it's worth it. Your commander has got an X in the cost. There's a lot of colorless pips in this deck. So I wouldn't argue against Soul Ring, but I guess I see what you're saying, where fixing might be more important than just having colorless mana in this deck.
Yes.
I think Soul Ring's so good, I would still run it. Particularly, I think there's just enough stuff to use it on here. But in theory, I hear what you're saying. So of the sorcery ones he's running, myself, I like Cultivate well enough, and I think Skyshroud Claim, because you can get those basic land types and use it to double fix. You can grab, any combination you need or want the most. I think is worth it. I don't love the other 3, Explosive Vegetation, Far Wanderings, or Explore. But what do you guys think before I give my rationale there?
I don't like Explore. Far Wanderings is on the edge for me, but I do like Explosive Vegetation in this deck. Just due to the simple fact, it is pretty much the same thing as Skyshroud Claim. You're getting 2 lands for 4 mana. Yes, they come into play tapped, but seeing how this is a big mana deck, if you have it early enough, it's not going to make a difference.
Yeah, Ranger's Path, I think, gets you 2 and they come in untapped, or are those just forests?
I don't remember.
2 forest cards, so
But
it
you
will
can
grab the
get the
duels.
shock lands and stuff if you want to with Ranger's Path. So that's useful. I would run that over Vegetation in this deck.
It's like I read an article about that some time
You did,
ago.
yeah. And I think generally speaking, like if you can go to 2 mana, like Vegetation, I don't think it's not bad, but you can do the same thing with Nature's Lore and get 1 land for half the mana and have it come into play untapped and have it be a dual land. So like I think Vegetation's fine if you're going like 12 ramp spells deep, but I think if I'm only running 6 or 8 or something, I would much rather run the 2 mana ones.
So Farseek, Rampant Growth, Nature's Lore.
Even like Sakura Tribe Elder, because this is a creature deck and you can reuse it if you need to. If you happen to want to put Gyrus out on turn 3 or 4 or something after you have already used Sakura Tribe Elder, you can I'll bring it back again and use it again.
Yep.
There's just not much downside to that. So that would be one I would strongly consider as well. I don't love Far Wanderings, and I think it's an interesting card, but whenever I've tried it, here's what I've found. I found that early game when I really want to ramp, it's almost always like a worse version of whatever I can be running. It's a worse Kadamas Reach or it's a worse Nature's Lore or whatever. And I think when it gets better, you don't care. Like, okay, sometimes on turn 9, it can get me 2 lands, or 3 lands, I guess. But at that point in the game, do you really care for the most part?
No.
So it's worse when it matters, and it's better when it doesn't matter, almost. And similarly with Explorer's a disgustingly good card in other formats. But I think here, I'd rather just go get a land and put it into play for 2 mana using, like, Rampant Growth or Nature's Lore or Secure Tribe Elder. I just want to. I don't want to, like, mess around and hope I get a land with that draw. I just want to get a land and put it into play.
True.
So I would swap a few of those out and maybe even add in 1 or 2 more. I think this deck is going to get mana hungry down the road, and I think you want probably 10-ish ramp sources, I think. So I would improve a couple of them, maybe add in a couple as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
How about the draw he's running?
It doesn't exist.
There's a risk factor.
I don't consider that draw.
Well, I think risk factor is a really good card. It's a good card in colors that don't have other options, maybe, or where you're going to do things like copy it, or where you're doing things with it,
or where the damage matters.
Right. You're doubling the damage somehow, or it's doing other things for you. The damage is going to enable a Rakdos shenanigan or something like that. I think I just want to draw cards here. Like if I'm going to spend 4 mana, I just want to draw cards off of a Ambitions Cost or a Harmonize or something.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, like you said, there's not much. There isn't. Like there's that, and that's about it for draw. And I think it's going to make life much easier if he also has another 6 or 8 or 9 draw sources here. And you're in the right colors for it. You're in Jund. You have access to some of the best repeatable draw spells in the game. And I would probably go with 1 or 2 repeatable ones, things like Phyrexian Arena or Outpost Siege or Sylvan Library or Death Ritual, things that are going to get you cards consistently every turn or force someone to remove it. And that's not really a loss sometimes either. So I would look at 1 or 2 of those, and particularly the way Gyrus works, where it cares about stuff in the graveyard, you have access to things like Grizzly Salvage or Buried Alive or Gerard's Orders, things that like let you go get cards and put something in your hand and something in the graveyard. That's really good in this deck. And in Chris's favorite stuff, looting effects like Faithless Looting, this is a perfect deck for doing the Faithless Looting kind of stuff like you want to do in your Alesha deck.
Oh, I agree. Like the best card draw spell in red is Faithless Looting. So I mean, for 1 mana, you just can't get anything better than that.
Yeah, because you don't care. Like you're putting. Usually, when you're looting, the goal is to get 2 cards that are good and put 2 lands in your graveyard or something. In this case, you don't even care if you're putting land in the graveyard. You oftentimes want to put a good creature in the graveyard.
Yep.
Or put an anger in the graveyard, or put there's a bunch of good reasons to run looting cards in this deck. So that's one thing I would look at. And I think you also want a couple things like we mentioned, like Harmonize, that just are going to get you cards. So ideally, I want to see him mix this up a little bit with a few repeatable sources, a few things that deal with putting cards in the graveyard, and just a few cards that just get him cards to hand.
Agreed.
For sure.
And I think those 3 things, like right there, if we stopped right there, if we just said add a little more draw that's better, fix the land base, and add some card draw, and if he made no changes but that, I think he would see this deck function a lot better.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not here to do that.
We've got some more than that. So I'll jump to you here, Max. What would you like to talk about next?
Can we talk about the Planeswalkers?
Yeah, yes.
Chris rolls his eyes at me.
Well, I kind of went back and forth on him. I get why he's running them, but there's a but there. So what do you want to say about him?
I don't like either of them in this deck. So he is currently running Lord Windgrace, because this is just the modified precon. And he is also running Vraska Golgari Queen from Guilds of Ravnica. So
look at Windgrace. Windgrace is +2, synergizes somewhat. You're discarding a card, then drawing a card. So you're kind of doing, I guess that's called a rummaging effect, not a looting effect. But it's letting you put something from your hand in the graveyard that you're going to presumably use Gyrus to reanimate. And then it's letting you put another card in your hand. That's, I think, useful. Is it worth 5 mana?
No.
And is it worth 5 mana on a body that somebody can kill and make that effect no longer be there much easier than they can remove a Phyrexian Arena.
No.
I would agree. I like Lord Windgrace. I think he's a good, really good commander. I don't know if it does enough in this deck to justify dumping 5 mana into it.
I'd agree with that.
So how about Vraska?
I think she doesn't synergize well with this deck, so it says you may sacrifice.
Blasphemy!
Why?
Because you sacrifice another permanent, and then you cast Gyrus and go, bam, bring it back, and
But then you
shenanigans.
still gotta exile whatever you sacrificed.
Well, I would like Vraska a lot more here if Gyrus's token made it to the end of turn. But the fact that you lose at the end of combat means you can't sacrifice it to Vraska's +1, or +2, excuse me. I think that would be much more interesting synergy because you're like, well, I have this token here that's doing nothing anyway. I might as well sack it to gain a life and draw a card.
Right.
But instead, you're losing something. And yes, Gyrus can bring things back on the attack. But I don't know if you want to be too wasteful with that. Like, I think you want to bring things back that are impactful. You don't want to bring things back because you wanted to do something with Vraska. So I like her. I just don't know if this is the deck for her necessarily. Like, this would be a great card if somehow, Max, you could run her in your Regnan Krav deck.
Oh, yeah.
Where
But
you
I
can just
can't.
sacrifice a token and you don't care. You're just sacrificing a token, which you're going to do anyway and drawing a card. But you can't. So, yeah, if these two weren't in the deck and instead he was running like a regular draw spell and, say, a removal spell, I think that's probably a better choice than keeping them both in the deck.
Yep. I actually, out of all the Planeswalkers, I think Angrath, Captain of Chaos, should be in this deck. It's the new uncommon Angrath from War of the Spark. Because his static says the creatures you control have menace.
So for the most part, when you swing with Gyrus, you're already swinging with 2 things, meaning they need 4 blockers to deal with those 2 things with Gyrus and the token he makes.
Right.
And what's his -2 ability? His will
Amass 1.
So you're making
Or
a
amass
token.
2. Amass 2.
So you're making a 2/2 token, which then probably becomes a 4/4 token, or just becomes another 2/2.
Yep.
And because your guys have menace, when you're swinging with that, then your 3 creatures you're up to, so they need 6 things to deal with or something.
Exactly.
I feel like that's probably more useful than Windgrace for the most part.
Yep. That's what I figured I would cut it for, just because it's a lower CMC.
Okay. How about you, Chris? What do you want to talk about here?
Well, I keep talking about these Planeswalkers all day.
Sure. What do you want to say about them?
I would put Chandra Torch of Defiance in there.
Well, it's your favorite. You're biased.
I am very biased. Chandra's my
Yeah.
homegirl.
We talked about, though, needing a little more draw going on here.
Yep. Not to mention, she has 2 pluses. So not only can you flip the top card, and it's each opponent takes 2 damage if you don't use cast the card, or you can add 2 red to your mana pool, which will help
also
you drop
ramps.
your big fatties.
So it does 2 things this deck is kind of hurting for right now, drawing cards and ramping.
Yep. And yes, I may be biased, but it's such a good card.
Yeah.
The other one I was thinking about was Nissa Vital Force, or as everyone knows her, Nissa Lands Matter.
Yeah.
Because, you uptick, create a dude, next turn alter, and every time you play a land, you draw a card.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, she's just almost always good at any deck that can run her.
yes.
The fact that she protects herself and then only needs to survive 1 turn to make that ult is really, really good.
Yep.
I don't know if it has any specific synergy with this deck, but it's just never going to be a bad card in a deck like this. What do you think of the board wipe situation?
Huh? What?
Good. Well, yeah. So we're looking at, because basically there's Lavalanche, I guess, which is kind of one-sided, and Gaze of Granite, and that's it. Just those 2, unless I missed something, but I don't think I
That's all that
did.
I saw too.
Yeah, no. There's some conditional ones slapped on a couple bodies, but nothing truly. That's
Right.
just a
Yeah.
full board wipe.
I think you need at least 1 more. I don't know if Lavalanche is good enough for 1. And for those that don't know what it is, it's X black, red, green for a sorcery, and it deals X damage to target player or planeswalker, and each creature that player or planeswalker controller controls. So you can, put 5 into it and dome somebody's biggest creature for 5, and basically one-side board wipe them. But for the amount of mana you have to spend to do that, in Garruk's Wake, one side's everybody.
Yep.
Chandra's Ignition, probably for the most part, is going to one-shot everybody and deal damage to everybody.
Especially when you have an X-costing general who could
Right.
come out, with like 8 counters on him.
Exactly. Blasphemous Act is just going to cost you 1 mana to cast most of the time.
Yep.
So I think there's just a bunch of things that are better options in Lavalanche. And it came with the deck, I believe.
It did.
But I would upgrade that to the first 2 I would look at are Chandra's Ignition and Blasphemous Act. And I would probably try to find a spot for both of those 2 in this deck. I think Gaze of Granite it's conditional, but it's maybe good enough. It's nice to have the option to destroy all non-land permanents, so you can hit artifacts, enchantments, whatever.
I'd rather run Pernicious Deed in its place.
I probably would too. I don't love either of them necessarily, but if you do, I get it. I think it's a fine enough card. But I don't think Lavalanche is good enough. So, and I think this is a deck too where like stuff's just going to have to get killed because the more stuff is in your yard, the stronger Gyrus is.
Yep.
What do you think of his removal package he's got going on here?
It's better than his board wipe package.
It is. It is. Well, in Assassin's Trophy is a really, really, really good card, and that's in here. And there's a few other things that are decent. I think Price of Fame is a pretty decent card for the most part. It's 4 mana, but it is instant speed, and it costs less if you're hitting a commander. And you get Surveil, which I think Surveil is really, really good in this deck because it's putting stuff in the yard, presumably to animate with Gyrus. So I do like Price of Fame here. I think Putrefy at this point in time has enough better cards, but I don't think it's bad. And Windgrace's Judgment I don't love because it's 5 mana, but it's also, I've been screwed over by Windgrace's Judgments before when someone else has cast them against me, so like that's perfectly fine. I think Decimate's a good card. So he does have options here. I don't think Ruinous Path is a good card here.
No, Hero's Downfall is strictly better.
Yes. I mean, instant speed is just, like, you are almost never going to awaken that. I would just probably run Beast Within over Ruinous Path, because it hits everything. Too. And same thing with Slice and Twain, which is 4 mana to destroy an artifact or enchantment, and you can draw a card. Chaos Warp, again, is going to hit almost anything.
Yep. Or even just subbing in for these 2 that matter about artifact or enchantments. Unravel the Aether or Deglamor or Corrosive Grip, any of those are just strictly better just because of they're shuffling them away versus destroying them, or it just has split second, and sometimes that matters.
Yeah, because Consigned to Dust is the other one here. Yeah, I would pull any of those like 4 or 5 ones we just talked about that aren't good enough, and there's things that are relatively inexpensive that are just going to be better because either they hit more targets or they do it in a way that keeps people from recurring stuff. And those are, like I said, those are relatively, I mean, Beast Within isn't nothing, but it's also only like $1 or $2 these days. Chaos Warp is the
Beast
same
Within's
thing.
like a $7 card.
Beast Within
is it up that far?
Yeah.
Again, that's one of those cards like Path to Exile that I should just assume it doesn't matter how far it comes down when it gets reprinted. It's going to go back up again within 6 weeks.
I know what the price is at because I bought a playset of them for Modern because I didn't quite have a playset. So I'm like, I'll just buy 4 right now. And I'm like,
yeah, okay,
that's
well,
cute.
that's in the category with Path and with Eternal Witness that it doesn't matter. It's just going to go back up to $6 every time.
Yep.
I would still get one. It's such a good card.
It is.
Yep.
Well, what else do you guys... The creatures. This is a creature deck, so we might as well look at creatures, eh?
Okay.
Yep, the best creature in here is Savage Ventmaw.
Savage Ventmaw is a super good creature just in general.
Well, yeah, it might pair with the aggravated assault enchantment he has.
I could not believe that was an uncommon when it came out. Yeah, I mean, for those who don't remember, it's been a few years. It's a 4/4 for 6 mana with flying, but whenever it attacks, not deals combat damage, whenever it attacks, you add trip red and trip green, and to the end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end.
Yep.
So, particularly if you happen to have something that grants haste, it just comes down for 6 mana, and you immediately get your mana back when it swings, and then every turn after that is ramping you 6 mana.
Yep.
And he has Aggravated Assault here as an enchantment, which is a card that's, again, almost always good. And if you happen to have both out, it's just infinite attack steps.
Yep, and you net 1 mana every time.
Oh, right,
No, you don't.
Yes, you do.
Oh, at the end of combat.
Yeah.
But Aggravated Assault says...
Yeah, you don't lose the mana out of Ventmaw till end of turn. So you
Right,
actually
but Savage Venmaw is going to go away after the first combat.
Well, assuming you make it with Gyrus. If you're making it as a token with Gyrus, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're just casting it as a creature, it's gonna
That makes sense.
It will go forever, making you more mana.
I focus strictly on the bringing stuff
Yeah.
back with Gyrus abilities.
I know this works because I'm the one who told him to put it in this deck. So.
I know you were.
And there's a lot of good creatures in here that I like, but there's a lot of ones that I don't know if they're worth it.
Yeah, this definitely still has that pre-con feel to it where it's trying to do the land stuff or the +1/+1 counter stuff.
Right.
And I think you need to, personally, I would do a little bit of the +1/+1 counter stuff to help with Gyrus getting larger. But then you just want some awesome ETB creatures that will do something when you cast them and when you bring them back.
Yes. Like, Grun the Lonely King is a neat card, but I don't know if he's good enough to be in here, particularly because you lose his kicker when he comes into play off Gyrus. You can't cast that. And he's not able to attack alone because of Gyrus, assuming he comes back in off Gyrus. And if he doesn't, you're never going to attack with him anyway alone. It's just half the things on his card just are never going to work in this deck, so why is it here?
Yep.
And I don't know if Nesting Dragon does enough. There's just a handful of cards in here that cost, 6 mana, 7 mana to cast that I don't think are generating that much value. I don't know if Kresh is.
It is a backup to, like, Gyrus.
Yeah, I guess. But so is there's 2 Daragazes here that are kind of backups as well.
Yeah.
So that's one area I would look at, is cleaning a few of those creatures out. And we talked about removal before. This is a perfect deck to run things like Reclamation Sage.
Yep.
Because if it gets killed, that's almost worse when it dies, because then you're just going to bring it back with Gyrus and blow up something else.
Yeah, this is definitely the deck where you want to run the stuff like Rex Sage, Ravenous Chupacabra, Plague Crafter, Custody Lich, because you'll become the Monarch.
Custody Lich is really good in this deck.
But I mean,
this is a great deck for Anger. Like, I would for sure have an Anger in here, because I've seen Anger win games in Gyrus before.
Yeah. I think you kind of want all three. You want Anger, Brawn, and the black one, which grants Swamp Walk.
Yeah. Filth, I think.
Filth, yep.
Yeah, I mean, how often is there going to be... And if you want to further enable Filth, you throw an Urborg in your land base, because number one, it fixes, but number two, that's going to sometimes give you that Swamp Walk.
Yep. You definitely want ways to get Gyrus through, because he doesn't have any sort of evasion built in.
No evasion, no trample, and there's not much here that gives him trample. I mean, I thought I saw one thing that gave creature Loyal Guardian, I believe.
Yep.
Nope, that puts counters on stuff, so that doesn't even do it. I don't even know if there's a way to give him trample in this deck. I guess Rubble Hulk, no, that doesn't give it trample either. That just, the Blood Rush just gives it +X/+X.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's almost no way to poke through that damage here either.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some cleanup that can be done there. I do think Corpsejack Menace would be really good here.
For sure, Corpsejack Menace, because he's already running the Winding Constrictor. There we go.
Yep, he already has Constrictor, he has Doubling Season, he has Hardened Scales already. So
Parallel Lives would go great in this deck.
Yeah, because you're making the tokens, so why not double them up?
And I mean, I did get my butt kicked by a Legion War Boss last week in this deck, so...
Legion War Boss is a really good card.
Mm-hmm.
And you, not everything has to be a haymaker. You do need those cards that you can cast, even if the commander isn't out, even if it's not doing anything, that just generate you value. And if later on in the game they happen to scale nicely, that's even better. But, like for example, Scoop Mob's in here. Scoop Mob isn't an amazing game-breaking card, but you can cast Scoop Mob on turn 1 or turn 2 and you have nothing else going on. And then just so if it sits around for a couple turns and no one, because no one's going to blow targeted removal on a Scoop Mob.
Yeah, not till it gets bigger.
And if someone does something that you're like, oh my god, I need a chump blocker, I'm going to take 22 damage this turn, well then you can chump block with it. But if nobody does, all of a sudden it becomes a 5/5 and then a 9/9, and if you have a Doubling Season out, that much bigger than that. It's you need a few of those kind of creatures in here, even if they don't work with Gyrus, just to give you something to do maybe on turn 1 or turn 2. But I think there's a few cards that we could replace here that are just too much mana for what they do.
Yeah.
What do you think of the 2 Daragazes?
I like the new one because you can exile it and you get it back a couple turns later.
Yeah.
The old one, I think, doesn't really play well because it's reveal their hand, right?
Yes.
Choose a color, reveal their hand, and then it deals damage equal to the number of cards revealed that way. I mean, if you're playing against a bunch of monocolored decks, it might do some work, but I think it's a 6/6 for 6, and I have better 6/6 for 6s I would rather play in this deck.
I mean, even like Ravenous Chupacabra, I'd rather probably play in this deck.
Demon Lord Belzenok is the one I want to run instead of this.
Oh,
Because
sure.
when he enters the battlefield, you can draw a card until you hit a non-land card.
Yep.
If that card is CMC4 or more, do it again.
Yeah.
So you're going to draw cards, because this is a big mana deck. A lot of the creatures are 4 or more, even some of the spells. Mm-hmm. And then he's a 6/6 flyer. And then when you reanimate him with Gyrus to get that token, you're just going to do it again.
Yes.
Live on the edge and play the Rakdos Showstopper.
Yeah.
So when
Just
he comes
to-
into play, you attempt to wrath the board.
Yep.
Man, I don't know if I would have the
I would totally do
I would
it.
do it too.
too chaotic for my taste, but I see what you're saying.
But because Rakdos, it won't kill himself.
Right.
Because it kills
right, yes,
non-demons.
right.
So, I mean, either way, you got 6/6 flyer coming in. So,
Yep.
How about that magmatic force there?
Any of the Gear Hulks might be better than that, or even Inferno Titan.
It doesn't do you much good coming in off Gyrus. So if you're hard casting it at 8 mana, I don't know if I mean, you lightning bolt somebody every turn, but every turn, not just yours. But that's only if you've got it in by hard casting it, and I just don't know if that's going to happen enough to justify it.
no.
Nope.
So
I mean, the Inferno Titan would be the closest thing to it. It's cheaper. It's going to deal 3 damage when it comes in, and then it goes away off of Gyrus.
but it triggers in the attack too, so at least you
Yep.
get the attack thing off it, unlike magmatic force.
Yeah, you won't get it off the token. You'll get it off the original copy, though.
Yeah. Oh, that's right, because it's the Gyrus ability bypasses the on attack trigger.
Yep.
Yes. But, I mean, all 3 Gear Hulks in these colors would be great. The red one either is a risk factor type thing. You either risk taking damage or you draw the cards. The green one's going to put more counters on Gyrus. And then the black one's going to kill something and gain you life.
Yep.
Any other specific cards you guys want to talk about here?
I don't like Hangerback Walker or Walking Ballista.
They don't do you any good coming in. They're actively dead if you try to cast them off Gyrus.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they are both phenomenal cards. Don't get me wrong. But
Yes, for sure.
if you're banking on them with Gyrus, then it's not worth it at all.
Yeah, I think that definitely falls into the +1/+1 strategy versus the Reanimator strategy.
Yep.
Yeah,
And I think I recommended Hangerback, to be quite honest.
I think Worm Harvest isn't a good one in this deck. You're not putting land in your graveyard. I get why it's in the Windgrace deck, or why it was in this deck to pair with Windgrace, but I don't think it has any synergy really with Gyrus,
Yeah.
particularly for the amount of mana you're spending to do it. So that would be one I would definitely pull out for one of the probably draw spells we mentioned.
I mean, I'm not a fan of Whip Tongue Hydra, but I think I'm biased there.
You're biased because you got burned
too.
by it.
Yep, too many times.
I really think the more I've been thinking about this, Vivian's Arcbow would work really well in this deck. The ability to discard a card, pay X.
Oh
discard.
yeah. The discard of the cards are really, really good in this deck.
Yep. And you can discard any card. I mean, so even if it's not one of your creatures, it could be something else.
Sure.
But it allows you to go for a creature. And if you do have the ability to discard a good creature, you can actually set up how Gyrus, what he's going to do for you on this attack step.
Very true.
Yeah, no, that's a really good catch. Yeah, this is a perfect deck actually, because I always think in terms of Arcbow, where you're trying to get rid of something you don't want.
Yep.
But that's not true. And this is a deck where you're probably actively encouraged sometimes to get rid of good cards,
Yeah.
and then replace with another good card to hand, and then do the same thing next turn.
Yep.
Yeah, no, this is a perfect deck for that for sure. What do you think of, speaking of Vivian's Invocation? 7 mana, for those who don't remember, for a sorcery. You look at the top 7 cards of your library, and you can put a creature from among them onto the battlefield. And the rest go to the bottom of your library in a random order. And when a creature goes onto the battlefield this way, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls, so it kind of fights. But that's 7 mana to do that.
Yeah, all the abilities are phenomenal on it, but it's 7 mana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I guess the thinking here is, okay, you're spending 7 mana on this, and the creature goes onto the battlefield, so, I mean, if you're going to cast a Hellkite Charger, you were spending 6 on it anyway. So if you hit one of those big beaters on here that you're putting into play, you're not really losing anything. The 7 mana is going to the casting cost, and you're getting a bonus fight trigger where you're going to probably kill some. It's a one-sided fight too.
Yep.
Where you're going to probably kill something. But even then, like, that's the best case scenario where you hit one of your big beater creatures that was going to cost you 7 or 6 or 8 or something anyway, and it kills one other thing safely. I don't know if it's worth a slot even for the best case scenario.
Yeah, my biggest fear with these type of cards is you might not be looking for like a problem solution at the time when you cast it. You're maybe just looking for a creature, but 2 turns from now when you need that, that Windgrace's Judgment or that Assassin's Trophy, well, you just saw it off of that Vivian's Invocation, and you're not going to be able to go get it.
And I think if you're going to do this kind of thing for 7 mana, Sylvanas Stampede...
Way better.
It's not going to fight something, but you're almost always going to put 3 things straight into play. And I would rather take 3 things into play than take 1 thing into play and get a fight trigger.
For sure. I mean, even something like Genesis Wave or Green Sun Zenith might be worthwhile if you want to spend 7 mana.
Yeah, I mean, Green Sun, you can just go grab whatever good creature you need to do something, or the new Finale of Devastation, where you get the overrun on top of go getting the creature.
Yep. Or
I guess it doesn't have trample, but I mean, you still double your creatures when they come into play. It's still pretty useful.
I mean, the new Bantu, not new Bantu, but new Ronus would be great.
Got it from Ronus. Yeah, right. And I'm guessing it doesn't look like he's updated this. Maybe he's got some plans for some of this stuff too, because there's been no updates to this deck for War of the Spark so far.
Correct.
So that's mainly it from me. I think that's been enough suggestions. I think he's going to be busy if he wants to redo this. Any final thoughts from you guys?
I want to build a big mana deck like this.
So do I.
And just see if I can make it work.
Jund is just fun. There's just so much good stuff in Jund anyway.
Yeah.
And he's got a Thantis in this deck. I'm actually kind of surprised I don't know if I've seen a Thantis deck get played.
There is one in the shop.
There is one, okay.
I have played against it once.
Okay. Yeah, there's I think the biggest problem with Jund is there's not a ton of great Jund commanders, maybe.
Or they're all very similar.
Yeah. So I do like Gyrus, and I'm glad we got to see this deck. And so we'll maybe check back with Austin, because we actually get to see this deck. So maybe we'll check back with him in a few weeks, and we can do like a little 2 or 3 minute report back on a show talking about what changes he's made and what we've seen the deck actually do since then.
Yep.
Like a little mini homework for us. Maybe when we do the homework episode callback in July, we'll mention that as well. See how his deck shaped up.
Perfect.
That's going to wrap up episode 103. Thanks to our editor, Ken Peddle. You can find him on Twitter at LOAD3R. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max, the recently rehired podcaster, at CommanderCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at a Wise Squishy One. We'll be back on Monday. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.